Hello and welcome to another episode of Deprogrammed. I am your host, Keri Smith. Today I have an interview for you guys with someone who I'm I felt very blessed that he wants to come on Deprogram and talk about his story. I'm a little nervous about how YouTube in particular is going to react to some of the details of what he's talking about because the subject matter has been censored so heavily in the past. As many of you know, if you want to talk about vaccine injury, specifically related to the COVID vaccine, it's been a big no-no on YouTube for a few years. I think that they may have relaxed the rules recently, and so I've told him, Let's just no holds barred. Let's just talk about, unfiltered everything that happened to you. It's your experience. We're not going to talk about anyone else's experience. And so we're going to see what happens and if they allow this video to stay up. I appreciate you guys tuning in. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest, Drew Outstanding, to the channel. Hello, Drew.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Outstanding.
You are outstanding.
That is my goal. So yeah, it's been a rough couple years, a lot of paralysis, immobility, but yeah, I'm trying to be outstanding in a field, in my field, and whatever field I can find. So that's kind of my goal, my challenge.
When I first met you, I think it was that at a Myth Informed or a Minds event?
Mine's
At
over a year ago. Yep.
Yes, over a year ago, and you told me your Twitter handle, Drew Outstanding in a Field. It just cracked me up. I was like, "You have a really good sense of humor," and I love puns. So, you've got your handle there if people wanna find you. I'm just gonna say right up front, we'll mention it again at the end, but you guys can find Drew on X at Drew Outstanding, and his handle there is on the screen. So let's talk about what happened to you. You're an Army veteran.
Yes. Yep.
Um, you were highly encouraged to get the COVID vaccine. Which vaccine was it?
Pfizer is what it ended up to be. And it got it from the VA as well. 2 doses of Pfizer, and it, like you could say encouraged. I know James Lindsay says nudged. Like we were ordered to do so, just like you were ordered to do anything else required in the military. We were ordered to go get this.
And beforehand, did you have reservations about it, or were you some people were skeptical from the beginning, other people, but and some people were skeptical and did not get it. There were also people who were skeptical who, as you're mentioning, like, got nudged. Was that, or did you not have any skepticism at all?
It was a scary time for sure.
Yeah.
Looking for some kind of solution when it came to what would help. And from our leaders, I got heard things like safe and effective. It stops transmission. Don't want to kill grandma. I At the time I still have a mother, but she was 75 at the time, and I had an infant son, and they said you don't want to infect both of them, even if you're young and healthy, like I was, and but it stops transmission, stops contagion of the illness, and that's what I heard from top media, mainstream media, politicians, and didn't really turn out to be the case. You're muted right now. But yeah, to follow up, I wasn't on Twitter at the time, so I wasn't getting all. I was only getting one side of all the stuff, so I wasn't hearing all the hesitation. So I was listening to things like Crowder and Ben Shapiro and a few others at the time that were kind of going around and saying, this is kind of strange, but but maybe it's what we got to do. And then being ordered to do so is also working for a federal or a company that I found out was classified under a federal contractor status, requiring every employee to get it. Just because the company sold to the government meant all 6,000, 10,000 people who are also working from home had to get this medical procedure. And then I was also going to university for grad school, and same thing. Classes were from home, from remote, but they were requiring it, or you're going to get suspended, expelled, lose out on the money that you already paid for, all these things. So it was both a carrot and a stick.
Yes, the carrot and the stick. So you were listening to the what YouTube calls the authoritative sources. They have authority to guide decisions on whether or not it's a good idea to get it. Um, what were some of your first adverse reactions?
Immediately got the flu-like symptoms, which they said could and
Mhm.
probably would happen. So yeah, I became sick, had the flu, temperature, the typical things, which is fine. I mean, it didn't. I was already, pretty stressed out from all those things: the pandemic, grad school, a sales job, and then an infant son. I don't it was just it was a lot. So I'm like, okay, but then it turned into numbness, tingling in my hands, my fingers. That stayed, and then the next day, I'm having trouble lifting anything. So my forearms, my calves are just feeling like cement. Just tough to even move. And it wasn't a soreness. I was working out. I was running Spartan races and half marathons and the normal physical fitness standards for the army. But this wasn't a typical muscle soreness. This was, I can't do anything to make this better with Tylenol, aspirin, anything. And then not too long after that, I'm unable to move parts of my body at all.
And you suffered complete paralysis.
Yep. So I woke up one morning and I can't move my trunk. I can't move my legs, anything like that. I barely had control over my hands and feet, and that was the point where it's like something is seriously wrong. I need to go to the emergency room.
Okay, so and what happened at the emergency room?
They ran through every test they could think of, they could do. I think I was there for I was barely remembering anything because they're doing. I was in so much pain. They're doing all this stuff. But yeah, CAT scan, MRI, blood work, all these things, and it all came back negative for anything that they could see. But they seen my symptoms before, and they know it's Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's also called the French polio. We're finding out more that it's a top adverse reaction to this
Mhm.
medical procedure that we had in 2021 that I received from the Veterans Administration, the VA, and more of it's coming out. I think some came out for the Johnson one. I had Pfizer, and yeah, we're finding out more and more things. But yeah, they did. They had to do a spinal tap, which it seemed like they wanted to get my permission to do that because it was painful. It's pretty serious.
Mhm.
They do the spinal tap, find the evidence that they need, and immediately rush me to a larger medical facility.
So when they diagnosed it as Guillain-Barré syndrome, was there any discussion about the fact that you had just had the COVID vaccine and how that might potentially be a catalyst or related at all? Or
Not at all, and especially not right then. It was a matter of life and death to save my life, to get me the
right.
procedures, which is fine because I was so out of it. They were rushing me in a ambulance going to Minneapolis, so about a 30-minute drive, and I remember being sick, with all the bumps and a lot of pain and whatever, drugs they had me on, but and then once I got evaluated there in, the cities in Minneapolis, top hospital, uh, they put me immediately into the neurological ICU, the neurological ICU, NICU, not the baby one, but a more very intense. They took care of me, but they immediately said that I had to go into an induced coma, and so that was the scariest thing I've ever heard. So it felt like they were asking me my permission, but I'm like, do whatever you need to do. But I had to call loved ones and say, this is what happening and I need to go and see what happens, and hopefully they fix me because the illness was spreading to my heart, my lungs, brain, and if it would have got there, who knows what could have happened then. But they were able to stop the spread of this illness while I was in the coma for about a week.
Had you had what was your health like before?
I was fit. I was active in the National Guard, in the Army. I spent 4 years active duty right out of high school. Deployed back in 2005. Took a 4 year break to go to college, and then joined the Minnesota National Guard for the last 11 or so years. And so I was fit. I mean, I had some stuff going on from deployment, things here or there, nothing too crazy like this. But yeah, I was fit and active.
And so what causes Guillain-Barré syndrome?
They say that it's caused by a viral or bacterial infection. It's pretty broad, so that's why they're having trouble linking it to certain things. They kept trying to link it to COVID, and at the time, I had never had COVID. I had been tested so many times. The National Guard tested a lot, and then once I got in the hospital system for the Guillain-Barré, they're testing me constantly for COVID, and it wasn't I didn't have COVID at all during that time. It wasn't until a year later that I finally had actual COVID. But and so they're like, oh, it might be a side effect of getting COVID. I'm like, nope, this was completely before they know it. It's in all my medical records.
So you never got COVID until a year after you got the vaccine that's supposed to prevent you from getting COVID.
Yeah, isn't
Right.
it interesting now that we're looking
Right.
back on this? Yeah.
Now that we look back on everything that they promised and how effective it actually was, yes. So when you were in this, how long were you in this medically induced coma?
About a week, I think 10 days, 10 days. For me, it felt like 7 to 10 years because it was like a dream that I couldn't wake up from. I was in it, it I don't know how you have dreams, but, some of it seems like it's real and some of it seems like it's not real at all. So it felt like a video game, but one that I couldn't wake up from. And then it was also felt like torture as well because they were doing these medical procedures to basically save my life. The plasmapheresis and IVIG were these two big ones, basically taking my blood out, cleaning it up, and putting it back in or putting new stuff in. Way above my head medically, but I remember it being painful. And then, yeah, in the dream, it felt like I was stuck in a chair while that treatment was going on because it was loud. I was hearing something.
You
And
could
then,
hear, like, things that
y-
were happening in the room.
yep. And then people around me, when I went into the coma, said I was flailing around. I was doing different stuff. And so they had to up doses or whatever they do to kind of induce you. So I had never been in that kind of
This sounds
situation
like
before.
a nightmare.
It has been. The last 3 years have been the stuff of nightmares, and then yeah, and then waking up from that, I'm completely paralyzed. Even my eyelids are paralyzed. I thought I was closing my eyes, but instead, my eyelids stayed open and my pupils were just going to the back of my head like the Undertaker in wrestling. Like, it was the weirdest thing ever. Yeah, and I was stuck in the hospital for about 6 months total, inpatient. Wouldn't let me leave. Um, yeah, constant physical therapy. It felt like high school where each hour I had occupational fit therapy, physical
Mhm.
therapy, speech therapy, all these things to get back to surviving.
And so you mentioned the company that you were working for before. What was happening with your job and being able to provide for your family during this time?
Yep, they immediately put me on leave, so like an FMLA, and I had benefits like the short term disability. So hopefully, like I couldn't do anything about that. So there was things going on behind the scenes to make sure like my family is still being supported, which was great. And still a lot of red tape and paperwork and waiting on approvals and things like that. But yeah, it was good that I was taken care of when I wasn't able to do anything.
While you were
Since
there?
then, it's been a nightmare trying to, figure out all the red tape and insurance, and I never thought I'd be in this position.
Right. So you have a I'll mention it again at the end, but I'll just mention it now. Your you and your family have incurred over $500,000 in debt, after insurance and medical costs
Yeah.
alone, is that right?
Yeah, and that was
And
only for, like, 2 months.
That
So
was for that was how much it cost for 2 months of
yeah. So that was like the coma, all the stuff, everything that they scanned. I was getting medication every 3 hours, all these things. They're scanning everything, seeing all these people, and then I get a bill for $2 million, and then I'm like, what about insurance?" And they're like, "Oh, we'll bring it down to 500,000." And yeah, so we're still figuring out all the legal stuff when it comes to that and insurance.
uh, Drew has a Give, Send, Go. I'm putting it up here on the screen, and you guys can find the link below if you're interested in helping him cover these medical costs, helping his family cover these. And there's also a lot of information about your story here and what happened to you. That's just incredible that as you said, you're not prepared for this. It's not something that anyone thinks is gonna happen, and then this is something that can possibly, bankrupt a family. It has the Army offered any assistance with this? Is there anything for veterans to help?
I've gotten support from veteran organizations. They've been amazing. The VA has been treating me for my symptoms and the outcome, which has been great. Minnesota is kind of known for a little bit better healthcare than other states, so that's been helpful. But yeah, they don't connect the dots or look at how this happened, which is interesting to me. So yeah, but they'll only do so much. I've been prescribed, I think, over 30 different medications, pills daily. I take about 20, and each one causes its own extra side effects. And you got to do this whole formula math equation. So I'm trying to get away from all that stuff and do more holistic type things.
Mhm.
That's a lot better in my opinion, but it's hard to know what direction to go. What I keep hearing is be your own advocate, but that's a lot of trial and error and stumbling. But I
And
guess
researching and
yes.
trying to figure out the best options. What's the prognosis for, uh, Guillain-Barré syndrome? Like, you're obviously not fully paralyzed anymore.
No, I still have it in my face and my hands, my legs. Yeah, so I'm still immobile. I have to use all these different devices, chairs. So always I have these ankle foot orthotics around my legs. It's basically like a wrap around. Think of Forrest Gump, but not the metal ones. A little bit more upgraded with that. So it goes around my legs, underneath my foot, and then inside the shoe. So it's like an L shape, so I can be stable, but still requiring the cane, the walker. See me in when I have been able to travel. I need to be in a chair because can barely, even with all that stuff, I can barely walk a block without falling over because it's a neuromuscular illness, cognitive. So it affects my balance, my, light, sound, just everything. It's one of those illnesses where it's like shutting down a cell phone or a computer, just a hard reset, um, to get rid of the virus. Think about it like that. Yeah, virus, a online thing, but then or a hurricane. So the hurricane goes through, knocks everything out, but then everything is left in devastation, and that's what my body has been. Respiratory system, circulatory system,
Yeah.
cognitive, all that I have to build back up. And the prognosis is it's so rare that it's kind of across the board. When I was in the VA, there was a 90-year-old guy who got it, and it took him I was on a ventilator as well, he was on a ventilator, so I was able to have less time, I guess, on the ventilator, so that helped me heal faster than him, or this other guy was 60 years old. All three of us had Guillain-Barré syndrome and in the hospital, but those 2 guys were in over a year hospitalized.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I was in there for 6 months, but yeah, prognosis is it lately, I went through the whole ringer at the Mayo Clinic, and they got to the point where they're saying, "This is kinda your plateau. This is where you're at." And I just have a hard time accepting that. So I keep fighting, trying to be more active. Nutrition's been helpful. But yeah, I can't let this be the end of my story.
No, and you have such a positive outlook about it. How what are some ways that you're staying positive about it? Because this is the kind of thing that I think could send some people into just a dark place where they have trouble recovering. Like, how do you stay so positive?
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I've had those, backhanded compliments from friends and family. One guy said, "Well, out of all of us, we're glad it happened to you." And it's where he just kinda left it at first. But I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" And they're like, "None of us could eh, would still be here going through everything that you went through." And, so I took that as a compliment. I People have called me motivated my whole life. I like to take on challenges and understand things. I'm curious and love to be around people. You see me at a couple shows and
At events, yeah.
yeah, events. I love being around people and doing my best to do that. And I had my dark times. 6 months in the hospital, paralyzed, staring at the ceiling tiles, and at least I had Netflix and things like that for a while to watch. I basically I tell people I watch all the Netflix. I watched the Netflix because it was just so
Did you
much.
watch the trashy reality shows?
No, didn't watch those, but all the Star Wars, all the Marvel, everything that they had on at the time. A lot of the shark kind of stuff, that was help calming
Yeah.
because it was both, soothing with the ocean sounds, but then it was people that got attacked by sharks and still lived. And um, yeah, I know you're very religious. The girl from, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, that got the shark attack on her arm, the surfer.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
still, yeah. I watched that movie a couple times while I was in. I think it was Kevin Sorbo was in there as well, and a few other
Mm.
guys. But yeah, Soul Surfer, if I remember right. But yeah, so I watched stories like that. I'm like, I've seen people resilient come back from this stuff. And then even being in the army, I met some amazing leaders. A lot of people, I've volunteered on veteran organizations where, all right, these guys have been through more than me or less than me, or we share stories. And um, that's the way we survive, is by the people we spend our time with.
Yeah. What has been your experience with the, vaccine adverse event reporting system, also known as VAERS? Because I've read stuff about it. I've read how they're not actually, interested in tracking vaccine injury for this particular vaccine. Um, but I don't know. I haven't had time to just really delve into that and figure out how much truth there is to that. Like, you at what point did you decide you were gonna report it? And then what has your process been like with them?
Yeah, I mean, to start with, I thought it was already reported. I only learned about it when I was in the hospital listening to podcasts and things like that in the news. And I assumed that they reported it,
The
on my behalf.
hospital,
I
right.
thought it was a doctor's thing that they do. And then later I find out in my medical records that nobody reported that. And they knew, like, I was answering questions, or my family was answering questions when I went in, and it's like, yeah, I got the vaccine a few weeks ago, and been sick since then. And I it was so, for one, it kind of broke me that they're not connecting the dots like you
Yeah,
would think that they would. And then even the conversations I was trying to have over that time with the doctors, I would either get, well, it depends, it could be anything where you got it from, or this convoluted medical terminology that went above my head and I could even understand at the time, to kind of scapegoat it. But, I could tell when I was looking at them that they knew something was off. Some people, they're like, no, this is fine. It happens. It is what it is. And other ones, you can see in their eyes that they're like, this is not right. Yeah. But
yeah,
yeah, so it wasn't until a year later that I'm like, "Oh, I guess we have to report into VAERS ourselves." And even at the time, I couldn't use my hands. I still can't use my hands on keyboard that well, so it's a lot of voice, direction and stuff like that. And it was a tough process to put all that through. And then you hear, like you said, the negative stuff, or who knows if the data is being accepted and what happens after that. And I don't know. I'm so jaded about medical, government, all this stuff. To be honest, I've just been I keep waiting for the adults in the room to come to their senses and realize mistakes were made, but not a lot has changed in 3 years.
So is that the way having to self-report it and instead of the medical professionals reporting it as a possible adverse event? Like you said, that some of them the doctors had the attitude of, it could be anything. Yeah, it could be anything, including it could be this vaccine I just got that made me sick until this happened. Like, it could be that. Let's
Yeah.
report it in case it's that. Is that the procedure? Is that people, if you have not just with the COVID vaccine, but with any vaccine, if you have a potential adverse effect, it's up to you to go and report it?
Yeah, I've never heard of that before, and so, yeah, I guess so. It's been hard to navigate this area.
And then what happens when you report it? Do you have follow-up? Is the government, like,
Not really.
interest
I've heard of people, you know, getting offered compensation of $53 or, some for
Oh.
1,000 or
Oh.
whatever, and that's some of those things wouldn't even cover the gas to get to the hospital, let alone, like I said, the $500,000 in counting, and all these different, hospital bills.
It's almost insulting. $53 is more like it's almost like, "Don't give me anything if you're gonna give me something so insulting."
Yeah. The big thing is I heard it's the emergency use authorization, the EUA
Yes.
is covering it, and then I asked, like, "Well, what it would take to go around this, or does it get repealed?" Like, in the name, it's an emergency use authorization, and wasn't it taxpayer funded mostly? And, yeah, I don't know. We do all these investigations for, 9/11 and J6 and stuff like that, but are we gonna have a full-on investigation from 2020 to present?
Yeah. Is Congress gonna be interested in figuring out how many people may have been harmed by this emergency approved vaccine? And the fact that they approved it, as you mentioned, with the emergency use, from what I understand, that's what prevents people from being able to sue any big pharma for damages if there
Yeah.
are adverse effects, because they say, well, it was we put it out under emergency use, which means that we're not liable for any damages.
Yeah, and then you hear later that Pfizer did an executive on the Pfizer board, they're like, "Oh, we didn't even test for, transmission or, preventing transmission and things like that," and I'm like, "That's not what everyone was putting out," and you just hear these things every once in a while in the news that, like, it doesn't make any sense at all, and then, yeah, there's not a lot of retraction from mainstream media, politicians, corporations. It's
So if
Yeah.
the government's not doing anything to help people who were potentially harmed by the COVID vaccine, have you found any independent resources for people that have been helpful?
Not that I've completely seen. I hear things here or there. I know a few other people that are vaccine injured, or their children were harmed, or worse, like they don't have their children any longer because of this. So that's been tough. And then now I hear other, military members. Some other ones are getting a lot of coverage right now, which is great. So if they can draw a line between, yep, we required it, and while in service, and here's the documentation, I guess that's going to be like the start to it. But yeah, it's a lot of legal stuff. It's a lot of medical. It's very political. I'm out of answers, right? I don't have any ideas or answers right now. So it's a tough field to navigate.
Why are you um why are you talking about it?
Like I said, I kept waiting for just people to kind of come to their senses, and it didn't happen. Like, I'd prefer not to talk about this personal things, but when they started opening it up to requiring the vaccine, or for what was it, like 12-year, for I think around the time that I got it, it was like 35, and then they brought down to like 12-year-olds, and then now you're getting in the realm of the education requirements for students. And then it got down to 6 months for infants, and my son was 6 months at the time, and I'm like, "No way I'm gonna, accept people to keep requesting this, requiring it for school and then even yeah, so that was just a mess, and I'm like, "Okay, this is getting too far. I'm gonna share my story." Took a lot a lot of guts for me to put my private information, personal information out there, but if it meant and for soldiers too, because at the time they were still requiring it for military members, and I'm like, this has got to stop. And if I can do anything, if I have to take the hard hits every once in a while, so somebody else doesn't have to, then so be it. So yeah, I decided to share my story, have a local videographer kind of document my first 12 months of Guillain-Barré syndrome and put that on YouTube. It's on that Operation Outstanding in Field on YouTube. It's a really good documentary. It's broken up into series and shows what I went through during the time. We don't talk a lot about the reasons for it because even more so it was censored back then. But it shows what I went through and be like, why did this happen? I got questions. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd rather talk about DC and Marvel and fun stuff and comedy shows and but I got to a point where I can do that too. I can talk about my experience and we can talk about, culture stuff and entertainment.
Yeah. This is your this is your YouTube channel where people can watch some of this documentary footage. It's you can also find the link below. It's Operation Outstanding in Field, and I'm just putting on the screen so you guys can grab it. Everybody go and check out Drew's channel. I'm curious, have you experienced any censorship in putting this online?
Not with the YouTube stuff. I talk more about adaptive sports, which have been great. There's a lot of veteran organizations that have been supporting me and getting me out doing sit down skiing, adaptive snowboard. I got scuba certified last year. It's called HSA, Handicap Scuba Certification, and that was absolutely amazing. So that helps out. But at first, when I heard Elon bought Twitter, I'm like, all right, I'll go check it out. Sounds like more freer speech, and immediately started, or a couple weeks, I start talking about my vaccine stuff, and then it was called permanently banned, I guess. And I appealed and asked why, and they're like, oh, that was a mistake. So now you're back. And so but since then, nothing bad on X. I host spaces, so I'd love to have you on a space, Keri.
Of course.
And yeah, we could just talk freely on X and trying to have a little bit more presence on Rumble. And yeah, that's my plan. I mean, I just tell my story the way I understand it. I don't say anybody else do this or don't do this, but there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to share my experience with this illness and where it may or may not have come from and the causes of
Right.
everything. Yeah.
I just think what you're doing is so admirable and so brave. Like you said, it's personal. It's personal. You don't want people it's really hard to put your pain out there, to put things out there that you've been through that are that where you're vulnerable. And I think that the fact that it's necessary for people to do so right now because there's been so much censorship around it, the government's not interested in it, we're not supposed to talk about it. It's just really shameful of our for our country. Uh,
Yeah. I mean,
and
other people like you're talking about other, sensitive topics too. And it, I, it's the right thing to do.
yeah,
That's how I feel. And we have something to talk about and we feel strongly about this. So like, why not?
right. How can people, well, first of all, if there's anybody watching who is vaccine injured or thinks they might have been vaccine injured, what having gone through this yourself, like what's some advice or steps or things that you wish somebody had told you or anything that might help them navigate this?
Yeah, first of all, you're not alone. That's what I thought immediately. I thought I was the only person that was experiencing this. I can't talk about it. And that, am I going to lose friends and family? And because, and I did, and, or, it's when I say lose them, I took it, personally be like, oh, people aren't calling. At first, when, it was a life threatening kind of stuff, that people are at a good support system, they're all here. But then as the time goes on, they're doing other things. And that was pretty tough. But then I got some pretty good advice from somebody, and they said, Drew, like, some people aren't ready to talk about rough topics like that, and especially people that were, promoting a certain side, the Chris Cuomo's and, stuff like that, and even your average, you know, whatever small business owner, your uncle or whatever, they'd rather talk about more fun things, or people see me and see a different side of me, of the person that I used to be. And that's been tough for me to accept, but I just going to have to create my own new path. But yeah, the people out there that are experiencing something like this, you're not alone. Uh, Talk about it to your comfort level. That's what I do, and I just kind of get more open. And the more I share, the more I see that there are other people, and then we connect and we talk on messages and try to help each other out. I've been to a couple pretty good vaccine injured events where there are supporters in the legal field and the medical and and the in the media, and so and politicians. There are a handful of people in each area, I feel like, that are doing the right thing. It's just a matter of making that connection and put
Yeah.
yourself out there.
Did you lose friends over talking about your experience with the vaccine?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. Like, we just weren't able to spend time, I guess, as much, and it just shifted the whole dynamic of the friendship, and I can't blame them. What I heard is you can't expect you from other people, but you got to meet them where they are.
right.
So you just got to kind of pick and choose what do you want the topic of the night to be, to just kind of be reminiscing from other things, or how do we overcome this? And yeah, it developed some character in me, I guess.
How would you say you are different now than from before?
It's tough to say, but I'm a lot more jaded about how
Mm,
the worst side in people can be at the worst possible situations, and how they conduct themselves, what no matter what their position is or how old they are and stuff like that. But like I said, you got to kind of just accept people or meet them at where they are. Or
jaded about humanity.
yeah, yeah, you think these people are leaders, are people that know it all and make all the right moves, but they don't always. So you got to kind of be aware of that. So I've had to kind of rethink the people I keep in my circles.
Yes. Do I know some people online, they might call that getting blackpilled when you get when you become jaded about human nature or about politicians, government, or things like that. But, in my experience, if people ask me if I've been blackpilled, I'm like, "Well, yes." But then on the other side of that, I became white pilled also because, I it better understanding the dark side of human nature, which I think was on full display during the COVID years, and learning things about not just our government, but about our friends and family and neighbors, and the way that some people were willing to behave and treat others who made different medical decisions, for example. That was sort of a black pill. But then on the other side of that, I found that I value so much more. It means so much more to see people who have good character and people who are not like that. Do you know what I mean? Have you had
Yeah,
that
no, I know
experience?
exactly what you mean. Cause yeah, like I said, first hearing a lot of people like you, Alex Stein, um, Tim Pool, Luke Rakowski has been awesome. I went on his show in Miami a couple times, and
Yeah.
there are people that are doing great jobs, and have been through something experience,
Mhm.
similar to this, where it affected their lives, their family. Comedians like Lila Hart, like a lot of these people, they stood up for their values and got negatively treated for it. And it's just, and you, then you hear about stories of people faking vaccine cards and things like that, just to keep their life and access and job going while other people are not. Yeah, so a lot of people made different decisions, but it's good to hear personal stories of the people that rose up against all of it, or you know, knew about stuff ahead of time and acted differently, and now are supporting people like me, other military members that said, no, I'm not doing this, and they got kicked out of the military for it. And so it's just been across the board. Everyone has a story, and it's worth hearing them out.
Yeah. It I love Lila Hart, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, she's absolutely incredible.
Yes. She just a lovely human being, and you're right, like, stood up for truth and for her rights to choose her own, to make her own medical decisions, and went through that whole firestorm of what happened after that, and yeah, I really love her. Um, you mentioned the people that were having to fake the vax cards to have access to certain things, or to maintain their in some like career, or to get into certain places and things like that. Can I share a bit of levity with you and maybe make you laugh?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like the black pill happens, and then the white pill, you hear some good stories of people going through stuff, and then I like the clown pill too. So the
Oh, the
comedy has been
clown
my
pill.
clown pill of.
Drew, I've never heard it called that. I'm
No,
gonna
you
start
haven't?
using
Oh,
that. That's great. That's a
I
great
can't
way
remember
to
who I heard it
describe
from.
it.
Might have been Michael Malice, but yeah, there's other people. The clown pill.
Well, because that's such a great way of describing it, right? Because those years were so clownish. It was so absurd. We were living in a funhouse mirror. Like, everything up is down, down is up. This is absurd. Things like, when you get to a restaurant, put on your mask, but only to walk to your table past a lot of people not wearing masks, and then take it off. And that's supposed to protect you and everyone else. And it's so insane. And we're all expected to do this. Like, it's not crazy. And so I dealt with it with the clown pill. I didn't know it was called that, but I tried to have a bit of humor about it, because otherwise it's just depressing what you're living in, the reality. And I had decided, because I never got the vax, and I had decided, if anyone ever asked me for my, can I see your vaccine card? I had a piece of, 8 by 11 paper, and I had it folded in, like, in 1,000 tiny squares. So it was the tiniest little wad of, so, because I really wanted them to have to open each fold, and it to take forever as they're opening my vaccine paperwork, and then they get it open and it just said no. Is that only funny to me? But
No, that's
no,
awesome. Yeah.
but nobody asked for it. I never got to play the joke. I would just be
Oh,
like, "Do you wanna see my vaccine card so I can have the I could see you open it?" But no,
that's great.
yeah, it was fortunately, I'm not sure, what part of the country you live in, or if you're open about that. You don't have to be.
Yep,
But
Minnesota.
okay, Minnesota. Well, here in Texas, it depended on where you were at. And so if you were in Austin, it was very rigid, and it was like, a cult almost. There was an orthodoxy about how you're supposed to behave during the COVID years. But outside of Austin, where I lived, it was a lot more freedom, and like liberty, and people to be able to choose how they responded to it for the most part. And so we didn't have as much of that at the part of Texas where I'm at. Um, how is your family? We don't have to get too specific, but how's your loved ones? Like, how's this affected your life? Like, where you're at right now?
Yeah, it's changed everything. We've been through hell and had to climb back out of it, and just kind of redoing our life from scratch and doing the best we can. Like, it's not easy at all. But yeah, going back to the white pill, what keeps me going is my son. He's almost 4 now, and just tons of energy, and makes me laugh, and he's remembering things and asking me questions now. And yeah, so he keeps me going, and it's good in a way that, now I have time. I'm considered medically retired from the military now, and where I used to just go kind of nonstop and now I have him to, spend more time with, and it's just been a a blessing and a curse in a way. But yeah,
To be a parent, you mean?
yeah, to be a parent, it's my first child, and yeah, we're figuring it out, and it's nothing you can plan for. There's no game plan kind of for this, but yeah, it's brought us closer together for sure.
Speaking of the white pill after the black pill, I've heard some people say, we're living in such dark times and you go through these cycles in human history of the hard times, right? The trying times, the dystopia times. And I've heard some people say, "Oh, you should never bring a child into the world or be a parent during the rough times." And what would you say to someone like that?
When has there ever not been rough times? Whenever we have been not at war, or, all the inflation, poverty, drugs, all the stuff that's throughout now or the last 100 years, last 1,000, 2,000, like there's always going to be stuff. What if people said that back then and say like, oh, we're not going to have kids? Like you and I would not be here today, you know?
Right.
Because yeah, there's never going to be a perfect moment to have it. Yeah. So like, yeah, he was born in 2020, so we call him a COVID baby, you know? So
Is that his
it's
name? No.
yeah, well, that's what I joked, before he arrived. It was, should we name him Rona or Covey,
Oh, no.
And so that
Some
was,
people
like,
did
during that
that.
time, yeah.
Some people
Did
did
they?
that. Yes.
No, we didn't go that far, but yeah. 'Cause, yeah, for a while, it was like, "Oh, yeah, this is kinda whatever," but then, like, all these policies just, like, stuck around, and it's like, "What are we doing here?"
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I would say have as many children as God will give you, as God will gift you. Like, that's my mentality. Like, it's just let's just keep going, and then it's on I'm sure you talk about this, I've heard you talk about it's like it's on the parents, like, raise good kids and do your best. It's gonna be tough, but it's gonna be more rewarding in the long run, and yeah, to answer your question before, yeah, my son just keeps me going. It's our legacy. It's he does things where it's like, "Oh my god, I probably used to do that, or I still do that now in my adult way and of being stubborn or funny or whatever." So, it's like, "Okay, kid, I can tell what you're doing. You're stalling, so you don't have to go to bed right now, so you're asking for everything in the cupboard," and, you know yeah, so it's fun.
I think it's
It's life. It's tough, but it's worth it, and it builds character, and you get a laugh.
and it's meaningful. I think it's, like, the most meaningful 2 roles you can have in life are spouse and parent. Like, that's the that's the best way to fight the dark times, actually. Like, the people are afraid to bring, to create a family, and it's like, "No, but that's I think, possibly the antidote, um, and to be a good parent." And so, I commend you for that also, and thank you for sharing that part of yourself as well. Um, what can people do if they wanna help? If they wanna help you in particular, but also if they wanna learn more about, VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, if they wanna learn about the vaccine injured, like, how would you, where would you point people?
I mean, immediately just have tough conversations.